Good morning, everyone. Today's topic of discussion is bloodstream infection. Generally, blood which is present in our body is sterile. It does not contain any type of microorganism. But when any microorganism such as bacteria, virus, fungus, or parasite enters into the blood and it causes different type of diseases, then it is called bloodstream infection. The bloodstream infection is a severe condition. It required immediate identification and treatment for the betterment of the patient. Now, what is the bloodstream infection? The presence of microorganisms in blood, which constitute one of the most serious situations among infectious diseases, are called bloodstream infection. Microbial invasion of bloodstream can have serious immediate consequences such as shock, multiple organ failure, and disseminated intravascular coagulopathies. There are some terminologies which are related to the bloodstream infections such as bacteremia, septicemia, parasitemia, viremia, and fungemia. What is the bacteremia? The presence of bacteremia in blood without any multiplication is called bacteremia, while septicemia are bacteria. In septicemia, bacteria circulate and actively multiply in the bloodstream and may produce their products such as toxin, which are responsible for the harmful effect to the host. Other than this, the presence of virus is called viremia, the presence of parasite in blood is called parasitemia, and the presence of fungemia the presence of fungus in blood is called fungemia. The suffix emia is derived from the Greek word which means presence of substance in the blood. From there, it takes a word bacteremia, septicemia, fungemia, and parasitemia. Now, types of bacteremia. There are three types of bacteremia: transient bacteremia, continuous bacteremia, and intermittent bacteremia. The name is given according to the presence of bacteria in blood. In transient bacteremia occurs spontaneously or with minor events such as brushing teeth or chewing food or instrumentation of contaminated mucosal site or surgery involving non-sterile site. These circumstances may also lead to the septicemia, but normally the bacteria are cleared from the blood due to the host immune system. Now, continuous bacteremia in this organism are released into the bloodstream at a fairly constant rate. It is due to the septic shock, endocarditis, and other endovascular infections. Other than this, the continuous bacteremia are seen in certain type of infections such as enteric fever, brucellosis, and leptospirosis. Now, intermittent bacteremia. In this type of bacteremia, bacteria are released into the blood intermittently. The cause of intermittent bacteremia are undrained abscesses, early course of meningitis, pneumonia, pyogenic arthritis and osteomyelitis are also responsible for the intermittent bacteremia. In this type of diseases, the bacteria released into the blood at regular time interval, such as in approximately 45 minutes before a febrile illness. Bacteria released into the blood. Etiological agents of bloodstream infections. Pathogens of all four major groups of microbes are responsible for the bloodstream infections such as bacteria, virus, fungus, and parasite. Now, bacterial etiology of bloodstream infections. Bacterial agent account for the majority of bloodstream infection. There are two types of bloodstream infection: primary bloodstream infection and secondary bloodstream infection. In primary bloodstream infection, the bacteria direct enters into the blood after any infection, while in secondary bloodstream infection, bacteria primarily infect other sites and subsequently spill over to the bloodstream. The common agent which are responsible for the primary bloodstream infections are typhoidal salmonella, brucella or spirochetes such as leptospira and borrelia, Haeck group of pathogens, viridins, streptococci and rickettsia which infect its vascular endothelium. The common agent which are responsible for the secondary bloodstream infection are gram-positive cocci, staphylococci, beta hemolytic streptococci, enterococci and pneumococci. Gram-negative cocci which are responsible for the secondary bloodstream infection are meningococci. Other than this, some gram-positive bacilli such as Bacillus anthracis and Listeria are also responsible for the secondary bloodstream infection. Some gram-negative bacilli such as E. coli, Klebsiella, Enterobacter, non-fermenters, examples Pseudomonas, Acinetobacter, Burkholderia, Stenotrophomonas, Haemophilus aeromonas, etc. are also responsible for the secondary bloodstream infection. Other than this, some anaerobes such as bacteroids are mainly responsible for the secondary bloodstream infection. Now, viral etiology of the bloodstream infection. There are many viruses which circulate in the peripheral blood at some stage of diseases and have a viremic phase. The primary infection usually occurs in the target organs. There are few viruses that preferentially infect blood cells, which can be considered as viral agent of bloodstream infection. HIV and other human retroviruses are responsible for the bloodstream infection. These viruses attack CD4 lymphocytes and macrophages. Agents of hemorrhagic fever such as dengue, chikungunya, Ebola, Marburg, Lassa, yellow fever and other viruses are also responsible for the bloodstream infection. They infect endothelial cells. Epstein-Barr viruses invades lymphocyte. It causes infectious mononucleosis and various malignancies. Cytomegalovirus also invades monocyte, polymorphonuclear cells and lymphocyte. It causes hepatitis and congenital infections. Parasitic etiology of bloodstream infection. Parasite enters into the blood via different methods, such as a parasite that directly infect RBCs are Plasmodium and Babesia, while some parasites that may be found in the bloodstream before they migrate to the other tissue. Or example, that is, they include tracheoids of Toxoplasma gondii, a mastigote form of Leishmania, and Trypomastigote form of Trypanosoma. Some parasites that may be present in lymphatics and come to the bloodstream transiently are microfilariae or filarial parasites. These are parasites which are responsible for the bloodstream infection. Now, fungal etiology of bloodstream infection. Presence of fungus in blood is called fungemia. It occurs primarily in immunocompromised patients, such as patient with malignancy, patient on chemotherapy, patient with diabetes, and which causes serious or terminal illness in these type of patient. Candida species are most common agent which are responsible for the 8 to 10% of all nosocomial bloodstream infection. Candida albicans and non-Candida albicans species such as Candida tropicalis, Candida parapsilosis and Candida aureus are also responsible for the bloodstream infection. Other than this, some fungus which are responsible for the systemic mycosis is also responsible for the bloodstream infection, such as Histoplasma, blastomycosis, coccidioidomycosis and paracoccidioidomycosis. Other than this, Cryptococcus is also responsible for the bloodstream infection. There are many factors which are responsible for the initiation of bloodstream infections, such as immunosuppressions, use of broad-spectrum antimicrobial agents, invasive procedures, extensive surgeries that allow the bacteria to access the blood, and prolonged survival of debilitated patients. Types of bloodstream infection. There are two major categories of bloodstream infection: intravascular bloodstream infection and extravascular bloodstream infection. In intravascular bloodstream infection, they originate within the cardiovascular system, which includes infection of the heart such as endocarditis, myocarditis and pericarditis. Other than this, infection of blood vessels are also responsible for the intravascular bloodstream infections. Now, extravascular bloodstream infection. In extracellular bloodstream infection, organisms multiply at the primary site, such as lungs, and are drained by lymphatics. And after this, they reach to the bloodstream. The organisms are either removed by the cell of reticuloendothelial system, or they multiply more widely and thereby causing septicemia. The portal of entry in extravascular bloodstream infection are of different types. The most common portal of entry is genitourinary tract, which is responsible for 25% of extravascular bloodstream infection. 20% of respiratory tract infection are also responsible for extravascular bloodstream infection. Other than this, abscesses are responsible for 10% of infection. Surgical site wound infections are responsible for 5% bloodstream infection, and biliary tract infections are responsible for 5% extravascular blood infection. In up to 25% of cases, the portal of entry remains uncertain in case of bloodstream infection. There are many bacteria which are responsible for the extracellular bloodstream infection. These bacteria enter into the bloodstream through different sites. The main common bacteria and their portal of entry are as follows. E. coli and other gram-negative bacteria such as Klebsiella, Proteus, Enterobacter, Pseudomonas enters through urinary tract, which is most common site of entry. Other than this, these bacteria also enters through intestine, which is rare. Haemophilus influenza type B enters into the blood through meninges, epiglottis, and lungs. Pneumococcus enters into the blood and through meninges and lungs. Reticuloendothelial systems are responsible for the entry of Brucella. Salmonella type B enters into the bloodstream via small intestine, lymph nodes, and reticuloendothelial system. Listeria enters through intestine and meninges. Staphylococcus aureus and coagulase negative staphylococci are enters through surgical site infections. Clinical manifestation of bloodstream infections. Bloodstream infection have a bacteremic stage followed by a septicemic stage. The clinical manifestation are evident only in the septicemic stage, in which bacteria multiply and release their products such as toxin which travel to the various organs and affect their functions. Based on the severity and the extent of organ failure, there are two stages of bloodstream infection such as sepsis and septic shock. Now, sepsis. Sepsis is defined as life-threatening organ disinfection caused by dysregulated host response to the infection. The common signs and symptoms include fever or hypothermia with or without chills and rigors. Hyperventilation leads to the excess loss of CO2 and subsequent respiratory alkalosis. Other than this, skin lesion, change of mental status, and diarrhea are also the sign and symptoms of the sepsis. Now, what is septic shock? This is the gravest late-stage complication of septicemia and is manifested as hypotension, DIC, and multi-organ failure. The endotoxin of gram-negative bacteria have direct effect on the pathogenesis of septic shock. Now, laboratory diagnosis of bloodstream infection. Bloodstream infections are detected by the blood culture. This is most important process for the isolation of microorganisms which are responsible for the bloodstream infection. Firstly, specimen collection for blood culture. Take care should be taken while collection of blood for culture as there are high risk of contamination with skin flora. First of all, the site of blood collection. Blood for culture should always be collected in pairs, that is for two separate venipuncture and two separate skin decontamination process. If a central line is present, then one sample from central line and other from the venipuncture should be collected. Now, preparation of the site. To avoid contamination with the skin flora, blood should be collected under aseptic condition using sterile disposable syringe. Now, how can we do skin decontamination? Skin should be disinfected by two-step procedure. First, treated with 70% isopropyl alcohol and then a second antiseptic solution such as iodine or chlorhexidine should be applied. This disinfection should be applied in a circular motion starting from the center to the periphery. The area should be allowed to air dry before venipuncture. Now, timing of the collection. Blood should always be collected before starting antimicrobial therapy. If the antimicrobial agent is already started, then the best time of collection is just before the next dose of antimicrobial agent. Now another important thing is to isolate microorganisms from blood is blood volume. We can take 8 to 10 ml of blood per bottle for an adult and 1 to 3 ml per bottle of blood for pediatric patients. Higher the volume of blood, greater is the chance of isolation from the blood. Now number of blood cultures. At least 2 to 3 blood culture sets such as each set consists of 2 bottles, one aerobic and one anaerobic are required for the blood culture. Now how can we dispense the blood after collection? Collected blood is then directly dispensed into the either blood culture bottle at the bedside. Conventional bottle or automated blood culture bottle is used for the culture. This is very important process. If we take blood and go to the laboratory after taking the sample, then there is a chances of contamination which is not good for the patient. Now transport of the blood specimen. The collected blood is gently mixed with the broth and then transported immediately to the microbiology laboratory. There are a few important steps before we go for the blood culture. These are the firstly we perform hand hygiene before we take the blood and use sterile gloves. After this we go to the patient and apply troncoid. Then palpate the vein and mark the area. After this we use 70% alcohol to disinfect the side upside down. Then we wait for the 30 seconds and then allow the skin to dry. After this we use chlorhexidine or provided iodine to disinfect side from concentric inside to out. Then we wait for the 1 minute. Then allow the skin to dry. After this we take an alcohol wipe and clean the bottle top, clean the culture bottle top to prevent the contamination. After this we take a blood from the patient and directly inject into the culture bottle without changing the needle. After this the bottle is directly sent to the microbiology laboratory. There are two types of culture medium used for the detection of microorganisms for blood culture. One is conventional culture medium and other is automated culture medium. In conventional culture medium, there are two types of culture media. One is monophasic medium and other is Castaneda biphasic medium. Monophasic medium contains 50 to 100 ml of brain heart infusion broth, while Castaneda biphasic medium contains BHI agar slope and BHI broth. The Castaneda biphasic medium is used in the for isolation of organisms which are more hazardous to subculture. Now the dilution. The blood is inoculated in the medium at a dilution of 1:5 so that the antibacterial components in the blood, if any, will get diluted. Sodium polyethanol sulfonate is added to the medium as an anticoagulant. It is most important anticoagulant used in culture medium. After this, incubation of the media. Upon recipient, the bottle should be directly incubated in the upright position at 37 degrees Celsius for up to 7 days. This is an important time. We take 7 days before we go for the negative report. In conventional culture method, after the incubation, there is a requirement of repeat subculture. Repeat subculture are made from blood heart infusion broth onto the blood agar and McConkey agar. From monophasic medium, subculture are made when the broth becomes turbid or periodically for 1 week. There is a risk of contamination due to the opening of the cap of bottle every time when the subculture are done. In biphasic medium, the subculture are bring just by tilting the bottle so that the broth run over the agar slope. There is a lower risk of contamination. Now automated culture media. In automated culture media, there are BACTEC and BACT-Alert. The most important are BACTEC and BACT-Alert. BACT-Alert Virtuo. This is the most advanced system for the detection of microorganisms from the blood. In this type of method, growth is continuously monitored and reading is recorded every 15 to 20 minutes in the machine. When the growth is detected, the system gives a positive signal. After this, we take out the bottle from the machine and then go for the subculture. The subculture is done as in the conventional method, that is from the blood, from the bottle. The subculture is made firstly on blood agar and other. After this, we go for the subculture on McConkey agar for 7 days. After the subculture, if the growth are seen on the blood agar or McConkey agar, we go for the further identification of the isolated organism. For identification, we see the colony morphology of the isolated organism. Then after the colony morphology, we pick a colony and go for the gram staining. We see either gram positive bacteria or gram negative bacteria. After the gram staining, we go for the biochemical reaction for the special organisms, such as we identify staphylococcus then we go for the biochemical reaction of the staphylococcus. If we identify salmonella, then we go for the biochemical reaction of the salmonella for the detection of the species. After that, we can detect the we can detect the species by the conventional biochemical reactions or automated identification system such as MALDI-TOF or Vitek. After the identification, if we identify that the such species is responsible for the bloodstream infection, then we go for the antimicrobial susceptibility testing. It is ideal for the endocarditis isolates, especially while reporting susceptibility of the penicillin. After the identification of the special organisms which are responsible for the bloodstream infection, we go for the treatment. Empirical treatment consists of higher class of antimicrobials with both gram-negative and gram-positive coverage. Example, carbapenem such as meropenem plus vancomycin. Definitive treatment can be tailored according to AST report. Now, fever of unknown origin. Fever of unknown origin or FUO is a very common term used by clinicians to refer to any febrile illness without any obvious etiology. The term FUO is reserved only for prolonged febrile illness without any established etiology despite of intensive evolution and diagnostic testing. Now, definition of fever of unknown origin. Petrostroff and Besson had defined fever of unknown origin in 1961 as patient having temperature of more than 38.3 degrees Celsius or more than 100 degrees Fahrenheit at least on 2 occasions, duration of more than 3 weeks, or failure to reach a diagnosis despite 1 week of inpatient investigation. Now, the current definition of fever of unknown origin is when a patient is suffering from fever more than or equal to 38.3 degrees centigrade or more than or equal to 101 degree Fahrenheit on at least 2 occasions, then it is suffered from the fever of unknown origin. Other than this, duration of illness of patient is more than or equal to 3 weeks, then it is also known as fever of unknown origin. In patient no known immunocompromised state and patient is suffered from the fever, then it is also called fever of unknown origin. Diagnosis that remain uncertain after a thorough history taking, physical examination and following obligatory investigation. If a patient is suffering from ESR and CRP level, increased level of ESR and CRP level, in patient platelet count, leukocyte count and hemoglobin is detected, electrolytes, creatinine, total protein, ferritin and protein electrophoresis. Enzyme alkaline phosphatase, alkaline aminotransferase, aspartate aminotransferase, lactate dehydrogenase, and creatine kinase. Antinuclear antibodies and rheumatoid factor, urinolysis culture, blood culture, free negative culture, and urine. Now, etiology of fever of unknown origin. 36% of infections are the responsible for fever of unknown origin. This accounts for majority of FUO cases. 90% of neoplasms such as lymphoma, leukemia, myelolemia, renal, colon, and liver calcium are responsible for the fever of unknown origin. Non-infectious inflammatory diseases are responsible for the 19% cases of the fever of unknown origin. The non-infection inflammatory disease which are responsible for FUO are connective tissue disorder like rheumatoid arthritis, SLE, etc. Other than this, miscellaneous causes are responsible for the 19% cases of fever of unknown origin. Granulomatous disease, inherited and metabolic diseases are responsible for the fever of unknown origin. Other than this, there are 7% undiagnosed cases which are responsible for the fever of unknown origin. There are different bacterial causes which are responsible for fever of unknown origin. The localized pyogenic infection which are responsible for FUOR, appendicitis, cholangitis, cholecystitis, localized abscess, mesenteric lymphadenitis, osteomyelitis, pelvic inflammatory disease, sinusitis, suppurative thrombophlebitis, intravascular infection. Other than this, systemic bacterial infection which are responsible for FUOR, mycobacterial infection, typhoid fever, icterial infection, melioides, listidiosis, brucellosis, actinomycosis, endocardiosis, spirochete infection, syphilis, Lyme disease, lapsing fever, and leptospirosis. Uh, there are some non-bacterial causes of fever of unknown origin. First of all, viral infection, which are responsible for FUR, cytomegalovirus, and Epstein-Barr virus infection. Coxsackie virus group B infection, viral hepatitis, HIV infection, HSV infection, dengue, West Nile virus infection, Colorado tick fever, hantavirus infection, and parvovirus infection. Some parasites are also responsible for the fever of unknown origin, such as malaria, amoebiasis, leishmaniasis, Chagas disease, toxoplasmosis, strongyloidiasis, echinococcosis, schistosomiasis, and toxocariasis. Now, fungal infections. And the fungal infections which are responsible for the FUOR, aspergillosis, mucormycosis, blastomycosis, histoplasmosis, coccidioidomycosis, paracoccidioidomycosis, candidiasis, cryptococcosis, pneumocystis infection, and sporotrichosis infection. Now, laboratory diagnosis of fever of unknown origin. First of all, we go for the specimen collection. Prior to specimen collection, a complete clinical history, such as including details of the travel, immunization, exposure to any other patient, are taken from the patient. After this, we go for the physical examination of the patient. It is also helpful in choosing the appropriate specimen for the detection of positive agent. After this, we take a specimen according to the infection or according to the organism we suspected that this infect the man, this infect the patient. For this, we take, in case of if we suspect a patient is suffering from typhoid fever or brucellosis, then we go for the blood culture. If we suspected patient is suffering from the mycobacterial tuberculosis, then we go for the culture on Lawrence media. If a person is suffered from the pus, then we take a pus and exudate specimen from the abscesses and go for the culture. If we think that patient is suffering from the fungus infection, then go for the fungal isolation. For this, we take an separate dextrose agar and take a specimen and go for the culture. Cell line culture is helpful in the detection of virus. Other than culture, there are many serological tests which are helpful in the detection of fever of unknown origin, such as ELISA and rapid tests for viral diseases such as hepatitis B and C, HIV, cytomegalovirus infection, Epstein-Barr virus infection, etc. Other than this, standard agglutination test is done for the brucellosis. Microscopic agglutination test is helpful in the detection of leptospirosis. Cold agglutination test is helpful for mycoplasma. We done Will Felix test for arterial infection. If a person is suffered from infection mononucleosis, then we go for the Paul Bunyan test. Vidal test is most important for the detection of typhoid fever. Microimmunofluorescence test is done for the chlamydial infection, and RA factor or rheumatoid arthritis factor is helpful in the detection of arthritis. Other tests which are helpful in the detection of FUR, complete blood count. Increased neutrophil count indicates pyogenic infection. Raised ESR is also indication of the infection. Other than this, we go for the histopathological examination of the biopsies obtained from tumors may suggest the underlying etiology. Thank you.